Welcome to the Decoding Story-Based Marketing Podcast. We're here to help you distill your brand message down to its most clear and powerful form. I'm Annie.
I'm Kristen.
And I'm Bo. Telling a story with your marketing is a powerful way to differentiate yourself, but can be difficult to apply in real life. We're here to share best practices and lessons learned about how even the most technical businesses can apply the StoryBrand framework to stand out from the crowd. In today's episode, we explore why it's so difficult, but important, for complex brands to communicate empathy. We're glad you're with us. Annie and Kristen, I'm excited for this conversation as we talk about empathy and how brands need to use it in their marketing and in their messaging. And I want to just get started with this question because some people, when they hear the idea of empathy, they get it, they're all about it, it's a natural part of who they are. Other people may feel like, I don't really feel like empathy is a big part of my normal life or my brand messaging. So let me just ask, do you think some people are just more empathetic than others? And if you're not naturally wired with empathy or to be empathetic, does that give you an out in your messaging and in your marketing?
Well, I think, some people do have kind of an empathy superpower where they can just innately feel what the people around them are feeling. We love those people. They're fantastic. That's a little bit different than what we're talking about when we talk about brands communicating empathy. We a lot of times will begin meeting with a brand, helping them craft their core message. And, one of the key leaders will be like, well, my partner says I'm just not empathetic. And we think, okay, well, that's a whole other conversation that we don't want to get into right now. But from a brand perspective, this is not necessarily about feeling all the feelings that people around you have. Really, we're talking about communicating what, that you understand what someone is going through, that you know the pain they're experiencing, and really that you are here to help them. So I think that, yes, there are some people that have some natural empathy superpowers, but that is absolutely different from building the skill, because even people that maybe aren't born with that empath superpower, I would say that does not give them an out for the rest of their lives of not thinking about how the people around them are feeling. That is a skill that well-rounded people can and should develop. So we also like to invite brands that maybe haven't previously stepped into that superpower of empathy, developing that skill. This doesn't have to take years of therapy and hard work the way, and for some people do in their personal lives, but instead, what are some things that I can just begin to practice to build that bond of empathy? So even if it doesn't come naturally, there's still lots of opportunity there.
I like to think of it like it's a lens more than it is like a skill. You know what I mean? Like it's a lens around like, how can I make sure that I'm always approaching marketing from the space of empathy and kind of identifying and understanding what it is my customer is going through, more than a thing that we have or we don't. So I think that's really what I like to look at in the world of empathy and everything that can mean. In marketing, it's a lens. And so that means everybody can adopt that.
Yeah, I love that it's a lens that you can learn this skill and you can learn to apply this skill to your messaging. Annie, let me just hear from you before we talk about why empathy can be difficult or why it can be hard for complex brands to use in their messaging. Why is empathy essential in brand messaging?
So one of the big, I think, beliefs that we have when it comes to marketing is most brands, when they think about telling their brand story, put themselves and their brand at the center of that story and talk all about themselves. And of course, that's what feels organic, right? You want to sell your products, of course you want to sell it. But when you think about the way that people want to be engaged with, you actually need to shift that a little bit and put your customer at the center of that story and talk about all the things that you do as a way to benefit your customer. And so empathy can be a powerful way to start to bridge that gap, right? And yes, you need to describe your products and services, but if you can do so in a way where you actually empathize with what your customer is going through, such that they need your products and services, it makes it a lot more palatable then for you to share all of the impressive and cool things that you do as a brand. So empathy really, it's something that I think when we talk to businesses and clients, like everybody kind of gets that they need that they care about their customer, that they want to communicate, that they're a trusted partner in this journey. But they don't often go that extra mile to actually say, hey, we understand what you're going through is hard, or however they want to empathize with that journey. So it's really the thing that actually unlocks the ability to talk about yourself as a brand by first empathizing with your customer and the experience that they're having.
That's so good. And Krista, I'd love to hear from you. When you think about the customer's experience dealing with the brand, if you're online, you're searching for, cybersecurity or a law office or whatever, what's the difference in the customer experience from engaging with a brand that struggles to communicate empathy versus one that does empathy well? What would it feel like? What are the differences on the customer's end?
Well, if we think about the pieces of the recipe that the customer is engaging with, a lot of times what brands are doing, if they're struggling with empathy, chances are they're going very, very heavy on their authority. I'll bet you. And a lot of brands do this where they want to, here's all the years we've been in business. Here's this thing we invented. Here's all of our certifications. Here's 5,000 testimonials. They go really heavy on that. So let's say the customer is engaging with that. I would say, first of all, what's happening is the customer is seeing, this brand is seeing themselves as the hero of their own story, which is a problem because customers see themselves as the hero of the story. So it's going to create a little bit of a subconscious competition. But there's also something else that's going on. When brands go really, really heavy, all authority, they're talking about themselves a lot in that way, and they're not engaging with their customer and communicating empathy. I actually think that can scream insecurity sometimes. I think about like my days of dating, which were a while ago, and I went on some very bad dates, really bad dates, where I would sit down with someone and he would talk about himself the whole time, and like essentially brag on himself as if I needed to see his resume before we continue on. And that to me just felt so, it screamed like a lack of confidence, and it screamed insecurity. And when I met my husband, he's kind of a more quiet guy, but he just had this quiet confidence where, yes, there's a lot that's attractive there, but also he was very empathetic. He would kind of throw the conversation back to me, connect to what I'm going through. I think about that a lot, that insecurity versus confidence way of positioning yourself. Now, this doesn't mean that the brand is insecure if they're going all authority, but it can sure feel that way if there's a quick brag list on all the cool stuff about them. So I think that is a little bit of the customer's experience when they go to a website and they're seeing logo stack, testimonials, awards, just off the top. It's not inviting them into any kind of relationship. It's a brag list. So I think it's very different than when a brand shows up with empathy and authority. And now it's very engaging, comes off as very confident. And now that's the beginning of what could be a really great engagement, great relationship.
Wow, that's so good. So I'm the head of a company, and I'm hearing this and I'm saying, okay, maybe I am realizing I'm struggling with empathy as my messaging and in my marketing. Annie, what work do I need to do to begin the process of learning how to communicate empathy well as a brand? What things should I be thinking about? What's the process I need to begin going through so I can learn how to communicate empathy well as a brand?
Yeah. Well, the first thing that I'm just like, I cannot get past is my TLDR of what Kristen just said is like, don't be too thirsty as a brand. And if you talk all about yourself, you're just you're going to overdo it. So a good first step is to just take pause, not talk too much about yourself because you're going to come on too strong. I'm obsessed with that. So in terms of kind of the process, like how do you build this into your practice? So, I firmly believe that empathy is a lens that anyone can adopt. I don't care, if your partner says that you're not an empathetic person, like whatever that is, when it comes to your brand marketing, this is absolutely a lens that you can adopt. So I think the first thing is to simply name and get behind as a brand that empathy is an important tool to infuse in your marketing. So that's like the first thing is just get some buy-in there that we do need to kind of put forward an empathetic front. That doesn't have to be the only lens we adopt. It doesn't have to be the only thing we say, but let's infuse empathy into our marketing. From there, the biggest thing you need to do to get into that empathetic mindset and to clarify how you want to communicate it is name the problem that you help resolve for your customer. Because empathy has to come from like, hey, I understand what you're going through. And that empathetic statement only matters if what they're going through is kind of tough. So the first thing really to do there is to dig into what are the issues that our customers are facing? What are the pain points of that issue? How does that make them feel? And then once you really understand the circumstances that they're faced with and the problem that they are dealing with, then you can really say, how do you empathize with that? Have you gone through that before? Have you worked in the industry and faced that challenge yourself? Have you gone through something similar? Have you seen so many other businesses struggle with that you know the consequences of the problem when it's not resolved? So step one really is, first and foremost, just naming we need to go all in on empathy and we need to adopt this as a part of our brand marketing. And then it unlocks the ability to do some of the strategic thinking around what's a problem my customer is facing and how can I empathize with that problem? And that's really the best place to get started.
Wow. So you think through the problem well, you name it. Kristen, what are some of the ways that a brand can implement empathy into their marketing? What are some of the tangible, here's some practical ways that we can start to use empathy in our messaging?
Yeah, man, empathy shortcuts. It is very possible. Like I see a lot of times, I see people just overthinking the hell out of empathy. Like they are just going around in circles trying to come up with the most magical phrase to get to the heart. It's like, no. Think about the problem they're experiencing. How does that make them feel? And reflect that back to them. Like it's a magic, very simple recipe. Hey, we understand how much is on the line when you're deciding about your IT infrastructure. Boom, done, sold, ship it. Like I really just think about what they're going through. How are they feeling? And reflect that right back. And so, of course, if you want to do some market research and interview some clients or some customers, cool. Get some data, but do not overthink this. It's like, we understand, we get how tough this is, we care about you, and just right back. So just shortcut it right back to that problem and reflect back to them what you're hearing. Reflective listening, again, same deal, not a superpower, a very, very powerful skill that you can begin to implement. So that's the lens. It's just think about how do you reflect right back to them that you get what they're going through. And we see brands all the time that say like, well, this is obvious, right? Like it's basic to be able to say that back to them, but it's not obvious to your customer that you understand what they're going through, especially in a market where a lot of people are skipping this step. So this is a really powerful experience. Think about how we feel personally when somebody says like, when I was a new mom and I thought that the world had ended and it was the apocalypse because I'd never been so tired in my life. And I had kind souls say to me, like, I know this is the hardest thing you've ever gone through. First of all, here's a casserole and go take a 30-minute nap and you're going to get through this. Like I could get teary thinking about how powerful empathy is when we have real problems that we're encountering. So don't overthink it. Just go right back to that problem and reflect back to them. You're going to create that bond with them that's needed for them to trust you.
Yes. I'd love to hear, Annie, what's an example of an empathy statement that a complex brand, so we're in cybersecurity or, we're not in a new moms, maybe business line. We're not, selling rocking chairs or, diaper bags or whatever it is, something that connects with somebody in a naturally empathetic space, but like a cybersecurity brand, something like that. What's an idea of an empathetic statement? How can a security company or a law office or a dentist office communicate empathy in a statement?
Totally. So first I'm going to give you the cheat sheet for how to get there. And then I'll give some examples just off the cuff of like what it would look like to build that out. So the first thing you need to do as a brand is to really articulate what is the problem that your customer is experiencing. And we kind of build the problem from a few different vectors. So the first thing that you want to do is like, what's the face value problem? So that is, I have security vulnerabilities. I don't have a robust cybersecurity practice internally. The number of breaches have, grown exponentially in my industry over the year, and I'm not protected from a vulnerability. Whatever that problem is, name that external problem first, face value. Then explore, okay, if your customer has that problem, how does that make them feel? What is the underlying emotion that's connected with that? They're probably feeling insecure. They're probably feeling vulnerable. They're probably feeling exposed. They're probably feeling like they have the weight of the world on their shoulders. So unpack what's the face value problem and then how is that making them feel? And once you capture that emotion, that gives you a perfect entry point to say, we understand how overwhelming it can be to have to constantly mitigate constantly evolving cyber threats. Or we understand what it feels like to be exposed to constantly evolving cyber threats. We know what it's like to be responsible for the high stakes security of your business. And we're here to help. So if you can unpack the problem and then really unearth the emotion that your customer is going through, which they may or may not be forthcoming about, right? Like we don't always reveal how we are feeling, but we can make some really educated guesses there. And that gives you exactly the foothold that you need to create an empathy statement around that. So we've been there. We understand. We know what you're going through. Those are all excellent sentence stems to begin to craft an empathy statement.
That's great. As we, prepare to wrap up, I would love for each one of you to maybe share just one little piece of decoded magic. What's the one takeaway or one thought you would encourage as somebody's listening to this, wanting to improve their brand's empathetic statement, their ability to communicate empathy? What's just one piece of decoded magic, Kristen, we'll start with you, that you would just want to give somebody, one little nugget to take away from this conversation?
Use this as an opportunity to create a really simple checklist for yourself. When you're communicating about your brand and you're struggling to know how to do that powerfully, just check and make sure, are we empathizing? Are we connecting with the problem they're going through? And are we sharing our authority? You do need both of them, by the way. You need both of them, but just make sure that anywhere you go, like as far as you're communicating about your brand, empathy, authority, check, done. We're winning the hearts of customers.
Awesome. Annie?
I think my biggest, takeaway and like the thing that I would just beg everyone to adopt is don't overthink this. A, it's important. You got to have empathy, but B, you don't have to overthink this. It doesn't have to be hard. Just simply speak from the heart, speak conversationally, speak how you would speak if you were, connecting with a friend who was going through this problem. That is absolutely the best path to get into an empathetic mindset and use that lens to infuse in your marketing. You don't have to overthink it. It actually can be quite easy and quite powerful when you build it into your marketing efforts.
That's so great. Well, at Decoded Strategies, we understand what it's like to be a brand searching for a clear communication of empathy and helping customers relate, letting customers know that you relate to what they're going through and what they're feeling. And so we would love to continue this conversation with you. We help businesses execute marketing strategies to unlock growth and win in the market. And if you want to learn more about Decoded Strategies, check us out at decodedstrategies.com and connect with us on LinkedIn. Thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you soon.